Thanks everyone for coming to our special minimum viable milestones event today with Robert Sayegh. My name is Abdullah Bogota. I'm the lead organizer of Melbourne Silicon Beach and a few other Silicon Beaches around the country, and CEO of Silicon Beach Group Limited, a non-for-profit company we recently formed to take Silicon Beach and Australia forward. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to propel Australia to #2 startup nation in the world by 2025. So your effort in that will help. That's why we are having events like this. So you succeed in whatever you're doing, whether it's a startup or a small business or consultancy that is helping startups. So yeah, so before we start, I need to thank our sponsors who make events like this possible. So let me bring up the website of the first sponsor. That's Allied Legal. It's a law firm, but they are much more than a law firm. Robert, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Allied Legal website. Just give a thumbs up. I can see your face.
Yes.
Yep, thanks. Allied Legal is a law firm, but they also do business development and helping businesses scale. So Inda, whose face you can see on the screen now, is actually not a lawyer. He's a business development and sales expert. He's having an event tomorrow at 12:30 tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. So it's in our meetup. Come to that and learn how to grow and scale your business during this COVID time. So that's they make these events possible, Allied Legal. And also the next sponsor is AppDemoVideos. AppDemoVideos specializes in actually creating videos for websites, apps, and any technology product. So they can demonstrate how things work. Have a look at their website. They have a lot of demo videos, and you can learn from that how they can help you take your business to the next level. Our last sponsor, third sponsor, is Yalmaa Digital. That is a web design and app development company. Fires from Yalmaa is based in Melbourne, but their company is actually based in India, so they could do a very cost-effective product development for your technology startup or website or mobile app or anything like that. They actually help Silicon Beach as well. Silicon Beach Group website is being developed by them. So that's it from me. I'll hand over to Robert to do the acknowledgement to the country and start the presentation. Thanks, Robert, and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Atullah. Yes, just before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. There's a beautiful website that shows where you are and who are the original owners of this land. I live in an area that's not mapped yet, but still I'd like to acknowledge wherever I am and wherever you may be, and pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and the original elders of other communities who may be here today. Thank you. Let me start by sharing my screen.
Yeah, you can see that.
So hello, again, my name is Robert Sayegh. I'm the founder of a consultancy called Go Viable and provide mentoring to startups and R&D companies with focus on planning and productivity. I aim to help teams to reduce time to market by half, and I'll speak a bit about it towards the end of the presentation. So a bit briefly about myself. I've been developing products since 1993. I started as a software engineer in Intel at the time. I had the opportunity to lead teams, manage projects, programs, work with software teams, multidisciplinary teams, and on different technologies, different markets, and different global teams in different countries. Over the years, I've participated and led dozens of projects, and I counted 28 products and MVPs that I had pushing out of the door, so to speak. And I observed time after time how products that were developed properly, they were actually successful. They brought value to the market, users loved them, the teams involved were proud, and they could finish on time, on budget, or even exceed expectations, including high quality outcomes. So in this webinar, I'm gonna focus on one of the concepts I work with, which I call minimal viable milestones. Sorry, my mouse is tricky. Yes, but before we dig into the minimal viable milestones, they are rooted in also the way teams behave and operate when they work. So I'd like to speak about this a bit. You probably heard the term product market fit. You keep hearing it in the startup environment. Basically, this is about combining the team's expertise and their understanding of the customers and the market to increase the chance of success. So from my observations over tens of years and tens of projects, I found basically I could summarize it in 4 major characteristics of teams. Looking at the scale of expertise and the scale of value to the market. You could have more of one and gaps in the others. So teams that have lots of gaps in technical expertise or experience in general, sorry, and gaps in understanding the market value, I call the bad luck teams. Bad luck because they keep encountering issues and surprises they didn't anticipate and get surprised every time, and feeling it's just bad luck hovering around them time after time. You'll find these teams with some disharmony, eventually lack of passion. They will face more legal and contractual challenges than others, and they usually burn out faster and harder than other teams. But most teams actually are trying to maintain that balance between more expertise or more market focus. So teams who have more focus on the technical side and the expertise sides, I call the wrong solution teams, simply because they eventually end up missing the audience. Their solutions are to high engineering standard, high quality from, again, the technical side, but they end up being mostly user unfriendly, ignoring the customer, often without market need, unfortunately, or not even a business model. And if they succeed locally, they find problems expanding to other locations. Maybe one recent example is Google+, if you think about it, that fits the wrong solution category. Google developed with its finest engineers, the Google+ platform, but they didn't have really anything to offer there, nothing new. Their strategy was get away to make sure their customers don't run to Facebook, basically. And the product was scrapped recently. Interestingly enough, another example from Google who have brilliant engineers is the Google Glass that was simply killed with media hysteria over privacy. Okay, so on the other scale, on the sorry, on the top left, there's the teams that focus more on the market value and less on the technical and expertise. I call these the expensive solution teams, simply because they end up mostly out of cash. They miss timelines, they often lose focus, and you'll find their products overpriced, but with poor quality, amazingly, and they get easily outcompeted. I think one notable example in this area for the expensive solution is Apple in its early days, especially. Apple came a long way until they became the successful brand we know today with iPhones and iPads. In the 80s, they were revolutionary. I don't know, how old are you guys or how much you know about this era, but Apple launched in '83 a Lisa personal computer. It was revolutionary back then. It had a graphical user interface. Thinking about it in the time, IBM was struggling to get their PC out with DOS, which is only command lines, nothing graphic there. But that product with Apple just failed miserably. It cost $10,000 at the time, almost 3 times the price of any competitor PC. They had limited libraries, which in today's terms, not enough apps and not enough operating system support. And they had an unreliable firmware and just failed. So, and teams that are successful, teams that can have this mastery of market value and expertise, I call the engaged solution. And that's where MVM comes in, and we'll be talking about it now. Maybe just one word about time to market here. And I put it as the TTM in the middle of the slide. I find that if you take the engaged solution teams with a baseline for what's their time to market, you'll find that the wrong solution teams and the expensive solution teams end up having a struggle with twice to even quadruple the time to market. And bad luck teams, if they're lucky, they get 10 times time to market if they are successful at all. Let's have a quick poll in this regard. I'm gonna copy this link to the chat area, or you can just, it's an easy link. Sorry, where's the chat? So this is a poll about the frequent reasons for startup failures, and just put one answer there that you think is the most frequent reason for startups failure, and we'll talk about it in a second.
Yeah, just a word about how to use the poll. If you click on that link, it should take you to the Poll Everywhere website. And I think, Robert, you need to activate. Yep, yes. Now I got it. Thanks.
I'll just share that screen for a second to see the answers as they come. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I voted as well.
Okay, I think we can continue. Okay, I'll go back to the slides now.
Robert, one question. Can you see the chat, or you can't see the chat, I think, when you're sharing? But yeah, if anyone has a question, put it in the chat. We'll, I'll monitor it. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'll go back to the slides.
To type in, feel free to type in any questions you had come up as you listen to Robert into the chat. Thanks.
So I'm surprised for the best that most of you got it right, actually. Missing market need is one of the most common reasons for startup failures. I combined missing on time and money, although they are sometimes separate criteria in surveys, but basically this is in the previous slide, the wrong solution versus the expensive solution. Okay, so, sorry, just before we dig into this. So, I'd like to say a word about this. Now, you know the statistics probably, and for decades now, they have been alarmingly consistent. 90% of startups fail. But it's not a startup problem. If you look across all IT projects in the last decades, over 70% of projects fail or severely miss budgets and timelines, 70%. And that's with established companies, known companies, successful companies. And the question is, what could be done differently? There are other statistics that show that those who are successful actually follow methodologies and know what they're doing. And this is very interesting. Okay. So, this is like an introduction before I go into the minimal viable milestones. because they are basically based about what I call the 3 areas of focus. This is before planning. Teams that are successful, before they even start planning, before they start working, they try to understand their environment. And I think those 3 key areas are crucial. One is the business expectations. Obviously, you'll find their time and money, business plan, cash flow, marketing strategy, return on investment. There are other considerations for the business, competitors, alliances. I don't know if you have fans or channel partners. You could also have commitments, some legal binding contracts with third parties or whatever. So these are important to understand and note. Another key area of focus is the target audience. Obviously, you have the end users, the customers who are gonna use your product. But as you develop over months and years, there are many deliverables and outcomes that you will produce. A demo, a proof of concept, a conference show, all that. You'll have different audiences as you go, not only the end product user. Even the technical teams who are developing could become the users of each other before integration, for example. And we'll see in the next slides an example that shows how to combine those together. The third area of focus, which is often, unfortunately, is overlooked, is the risks and challenges. Now, by definition, risk is something that doesn't necessarily have to happen. It only has a probability in project management theory. So when you have a risk, it's about the theory, I just admitted someone else. Risk have a probability, and then you can decide based on probability and impact what to do with it, how to mitigate it, how to prevent it. But many teams who burst into working at first miss this opportunity, and then the risk becomes reality, and then they have to deal with it. And sometimes it's too late. So what I see is that when one of these areas doesn't get enough focus, and that's why I put them like cogs, it's like the machine breaks, the process breaks, and teams who are successful have this mastery of how to keep fine-tuning these 3, not only at the beginning, but also as they go. Maybe I'll mention here one more example about how a big company missed on all these 3, which is Target US. Target in the US, you might be amazed, is only a domestic company. They exist only in the US. For example, Target Australia has nothing to do with them. They tried to expand to Canada a few years ago, I think 7 years ago, and ended up losing $1 billion and shutting down the operation in Canada. So if we start with the business expectation, for example, they started their journey by having a contract with a company called Zealer, who had over 100 stores in Canada. So it was like an easy grab. Let's just have all these stores, lease them, and fill them with products, basically. But they ended up buying leases for almost $2 billion that they were empty. And this imposed a hard timeline on everyone in the team to be ready in 2 years. So they had a strict timeline of 2 years, you have to be ready. And just to mention here, they failed, but also before they started in 2014, I believe, they had a survey that showed tremendous excitement in Canada about Target coming to their country. 80% of the people surveyed were looking forward to visit the store when it opened. And it's amazing to see how this didn't fly. So one of the early challenges they actually realized, but maybe didn't have enough attention to, was technical, that Canada doesn't have an imperial system. They don't use inches, they use centimeters, and they have a different currency. One decision they early on did was to create a new database for Canada that has nothing to do with the database in the US. So they just started creating from scratch a database for 80,000 items. And they ended up, because of all kinds of technical problems, to feed those databases manually. Packaging size, shelf size, where is the product in the shelves inside the store layout. prices, strategies of marketing, all that. So many information were entered manually and sometimes ended up being wrong, giving the wrong information. And that brings us to the target audience, the third area of focus. When the people started coming to the stores, they still launched within 2 years, they found empty shelves. Or when they did online orders, things got wrong or delayed. So lots of frustration, and people just stopped visiting those stores. And that's how, within a year, they decided to just shut down the operation. Okay. Sorry, just a second. So without delay, let's dive into minimal viable milestones. So there are like 3 layers here, and try to go through them quickly, but try to be precise. In the middle, you will see the scope, resources, and quality. This is the holy triangle, if you want, of project management. Scope is your features, your work, your breakdown structure. Resources are your people, your time, your budgets. Quality is, could be technical, could be the acceptance of users, could be compliance. I find just merging into scope, resources, and quality, according to the project management theory, a bit problematic, simply because it focuses on the solution. It assumes you already know what you're doing and why. And also there's like win-lose relationship here. You will end up, there's a battle between the amount of features you want to push in the product, their quality, and how much time and budget you have to develop them. And you end up balancing between those in a win-lose style. Personally, I prefer to start in the problem area. And the problem area is those 3 areas of focus. And those 3 circles are the same ones you saw on the previous slides: business expectations, risks, and target audiences. So basically the idea is, once you map those, and I'll give a detailed example in the next slide, you can start focusing on your next step in a minimal viable way, defining your next step by addressing your priority expectation, trying to prevent the highest risk, and aiming for a very specific audience. So for those who like definitions, I wrote one. The MVM is the nearest achievable outcome towards a goal, achieved by prioritizing an intersection of business expectation, risk, and audience. And a bit of word about the outer circle. This actually correlates to the team's attitudes I mentioned at the beginning. If you think about it, addressing expectations and risks requires and brings efficiency to the team to develop efficient processes so they can avoid the expensive solution. Oh, sorry. Addressing the risks and audience in mind, you need effective approaches. You need to understand the why. Everyone needs to understand why are we doing what we're doing. And that's important to avoid the wrong solutions. And addressing business expectations and audiences, that requires negotiations, communications, win-win style. And that's where you get all the cogs working together for engaged solution. Okay. No questions. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat area, and I can fine tune the message as I go, so you don't feel lost or if I'm rushing as I go. Okay. So from here, I think I'll just introduce an example. Let's examine MVM and create an imaginary product. And I think we have a great imaginary product for today. Be free to pitch it if you want later. My pitch for it is, it's an app that uses smartphone camera for detection of COVID-19 using IR analysis of the eye. It's easy to install. It uses the existing hardware on the phone and takes less than 20 seconds to get you a result. So this is, again, an imaginary example that I'll try to show how MVM works on. And hopefully we can take it on imaginary market and have imaginary exit. So let's try and see what could be the expectations, the audiences, and the risks for this kind of a product. So the business owners or the founders, if you want, they set the expectation. They'd like to see this product going out of the door in 9 months, and they want to have capital or funding for 5 full-time people. Simply because if you wait, I don't know, a year, year and a half, you might not have COVID anymore, and you might still succeed, but not at the scale of when now it's an epidemic and everyone is worried about it. And if you try to rush it before 9 months, it might not be realistic and too complicated. Other expectations this business might have, again, in an imaginary world and example, an upcoming pharma conference in August that they'd like to start feeling the market and show something to attract interest. There's a design award conference in January next year that they'd like to use as a platform for launching the product. One of the founders knows someone in the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and they decided to cooperate, and the doctor mentioned, yeah, sure, September, October, we can help you, be ready then. So that's not something you want to overlook, for example. As you notice, nothing here is technical yet. Nothing here is about the product even. It's just business expectations that you want to keep in mind. What about audiences? So obviously you'll have the smartphone users at the end, but as you go, even before you push it out of the door, it's a medical device. You want to go through regulators, the TGA in Australia, the FDA in the US, for example. You don't want to ignore those. They have very strict standards that you should follow in the development, for example. There are Melbourne hospital people you want to cooperate with and keep them in mind. And you have investors that would like to see a demo or something along the way. And we'll see in the next slide how we combine all those. What about risks? I also prepared some of those. This is like one of those cooking shows where I have everything prepared beforehand. So I tried to prioritize those the way I see them. In a real life example, there's going to be lots of negotiation and also maybe even techniques to see how to find out risks, how to prioritize them, how to estimate their impact. But for now, let's just run with this analogy. There's infringements. Just yesterday before going into this, preparing for this presentation, I Googled if there's anything resembling this kind of product. And surprise, in 2-minute search, I found that there's already a provisional patent for using the smartphone camera to detect heat, which could imply someone is sick. They are not using IR, for example, but again, this is only a 2-minute search. So you don't want to develop the product and then find, oh my God, there's already a patent against it. So this is very important. There's maybe harm from the IR being deflected on the eye. And of course, there are technical feasibility aspects. Will it actually work? Will taking IR images, analyze them, give you sick or healthy?
Robert, can I interrupt there? What is IR really? I'm not sure.
Infrared, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Infrared.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yes. Yeah, very. So I keep trying to find what I'm taking for granted, and I have to refine it every time. Thanks, Atullah. You want to retain talent in this kind of product. If you have a physician helping you and building your clinical liability, if you have an expert for image processing, you don't want to lose those. So there's a risk there of losing their interest, or if you don't have enough money, they might just go away. So you want to keep those with you. There's harm of privacy. Everyone saw what happened when COVID Safe went out from the government and the privacy concerns. And maybe even, you know, it might work eventually for a group of people, for everyone between 30 to 50, but with the eye structure for kids or elderly, it might not work. So this is another risk. The trick here again is not to do anything, just to have the big picture. It's about prioritizing from awareness rather than just rushing out. if you have this list as big as possible, as exhaustive as possible, then you can have the choice and make the decision of what to do next, and not necessarily, or actually necessarily not doing everything. Let's put it that way. And that's why, for example, I put the age group at the bottom of the list, because even if I can detect everyone from age 20 to 50, great, I have a first product. It could be my first MVP. I'll improve it later. But I wouldn't just kill the product just because I cannot address everyone. And it gives me the awareness as I go to make sure I have enough data from different age groups, because I have this risk. Okay. So at this level, it's just about mapping out everything here about expectations, audiences, risks. And then when we go to the milestones, and that's the next slide, that's where we want to be razor sharp, minimal, concise. Okay, from here I'll go to the next slide and try to create minimal viable milestones so we can create a plan later. We wouldn't have time to create actual plans and timelines here. I just want to show you the building blocks. Okay, so basically, if you think about it, there are all kinds of things here, but I'm gonna focus on the image collection. Without images, we will not have a product. We need to collect images, for example, to create an algorithm. We need to have images so that physicians, a doctor could help us say, yes, this is from a healthy, this is from a sick person, all that. So if you think about it, okay, let's collect images. I'm gonna cooperate with the hospital, and actually it's a business expectation. So the expectation here is cooperation with the MRH. I'm addressing the technical feasibility aspect, and I know it shouldn't be first, and you will see in a second that actually it's not first, but let's start with it. So we're addressing the risk of technical feasibility. We are feeding the expectation of cooperation with MRH, and the audience is actually the algorithm developer. It's not the end user. We're doing this operation so that we can give images to the developers. So you don't need a fancy app, for example, not just yet, because your audience is not the customer. Now, if you look at this carefully and critically, you realize this is not really a minimal viable milestone, not yet, not on its own. You cannot just, with this milestone in mind, start planning the whole collection of images. So basically what I call this is the image collection operation. But who's actually going to take those images? How many images do you need? Do you need a special device? Can you use the phone? Are you going to use 10 phones or just one phone? All these questions are not answered yet. So you need yet another minimal viable milestone, which I call the procedure. So before we go to the image collection operation, we need an image collection procedure. I'll start with the risks here and see how we fill in the audience and the expectations accordingly. Because again, these are like cogs I want to fine tune. So the risk when thinking about the procedure of collecting the images is mainly how many images, because we don't want, this is in algorithms called sample size or overfitting. If you don't have enough images, the algorithm will focus on small data and not be successful. But we can go to the algorithms developer who are the audience of the next milestone and ask them. They will tell us, for example, I need 200 images because I need 150 for training the algorithm and 50 to test it. The other risk we need is the repeatability of data. If 10 people take images, I don't know, you give it to the nurses and every day there's a different nurse. She got it right, she got it wrong. You'll take different images, different distances, different zoom areas. It might not be helpful to the algorithm. So maybe here, solving this, I would say on the expectation, we want to collect 200 images. On the audience, we want a trained person to take the images, probably. So that person will develop a procedure saying, use this phone, this version, this camera, stand at this distance from the person. They'll just build a procedure, how to go to the hospital and take those images. So once we have the procedure as a milestone, we can go to the operation as a milestone. But we're not over yet. What about the whole aspect of patients? Who's gonna bring them in? What about the legal sides of working with people, patients, collecting data, privacy, health aspects, hazards, and also the whole cooperation with the hospital, where they should help probably in this regard, because we want their interaction to be ongoing. We don't want to lose them after this. They might help us look at the algorithm when we finish and say if this makes sense or not from a clinical perspective. So even before, or maybe in parallel while doing the procedure, but certainly before collecting the images, we have the expectation of ongoing collaboration between the startup and the hospital. This is addressing the risks of legal and privacy aspects, and also retaining the medical advisor talent. And the audience here, both the executive management and founders of the startup and the Royal Melbourne Hospital. So I hope you start to see how this works, how you take those lists of expectations of audiences of risks and try to break them down to as minimal steps as possible. Sorry, just a second. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive analysis of the product and how to plan it. This will take days, maybe weeks, but I hope that you could see that in even a few minutes, we can come up with something and it makes sense. There's one milestone I didn't even mention here, which is the IR impact on the eye, but that's not a risk only for the image collection. It's broader, so I didn't put it on this slide, but it's also there. If we try and then create a mapping of the major milestones before start planning, then we have the whole IP issue, the executive pack to go to investors, there's the whole clinical and infrared safety, there's the image collection that we just broke down a bit more in the previous slide. There's a prototype for user experience, for example. And then after you collect the images, there's going to be an algorithm, maybe a first version of it, and then a prototype for showcase. And that's where you might say, you know what, this is my first MVP. So, and then from this mapping, I hope you can see that it's almost straightforward to start deciding on timelines, budget, interactions, and all that. There are other milestones you can think about, but if you want to prioritize, again, you don't have to do everything. There are still a lot of things to do. Even deciding, oh, I'm gonna build this for iOS and Android, or only one of those. I'm gonna use the front camera, back camera, both, whatever. You may not want to, you'll just make assumptions or decide things and defer those decisions to later milestones, not while thinking about the major MVP you have in mind. Just one word here, the importance of breaking these to small milestones. I still don't need to create the full plan, but I know where I'm going. I know what I'm missing. I know what I'm deferring. And also if there's a problem suddenly, I can localize it to a specific milestone. Or if there's an impact, I can start seeing that, okay, if I have an image collection issue, is that going to affect the algorithm timelines or not, or even the milestone or not? So it's like a GPS map if you want, when you put Google Maps on your phone. You know where you're going, you have the route, and then you know your steps as you go, but then you can maneuver as well as you go. Okay. Oh, so I thought we'll do another poll, but I see that we're already a bit hard on the time. It's not critical, it's mainly for you. I mean, I just put here another imaginary example. If you went with this product or any product you might have, as a founder, you talk to an investor and they say, yep, here's a bag of money for you. How do you describe your situation? So I'm not gonna do the poll, just think about it for yourself. And if you'd like to talk to me about it later, I'd love to. Now, after I've talked a bit about minimal viable milestones and you see how I plan, are you the type that say, yep, I have the money, now I know how to do my plan. I'll start planning now because I have money. Or I always knew what needs to be done, but now that I have the money, I'm not sure where to start. Or maybe you always knew where you want to start, but you're not sure what are your long-term plans and how to go there. Or maybe you are supremely organized and you have both a high-level plan and what is your burning first need, and you are just waiting for that money to come in and now you can go. So I'll leave it with you.
I have a question there, Robert, because
Yes.
a lot of our founders are bootstrapping, so they're not even thinking of raising money. So how might they approach minimum viable milestones?
Thank you. Actually, this is a great question because I forgot to talk about it with this limited time. Having this plan, I believe, and I also see how it instills confidence. You know where you're going. Again, in the GPS example, when you have it on your phone, you know you're not going to get lost. Even if you take the wrong turn, you know how to get back on track. So when you actually, that confidence is for myself as a founder and also for my investor. So when I speak to investors, I can say, this is my plan. This is my burning priority. This is why I need the money. It's an extremely different discussion rather than I have a great idea, give me money. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but
Okay.
but if you are not actually thinking of raising money from investors, but you're thinking of getting a minimum viable provide out, self-funding, how can that help? How can this help?
I mentioned it here actually. Maybe you'll decide what is your in-house demo video for crowdfunding. I just put it lower priority for now. But yes, I mean, exactly. What do you need to get to that crowdfunding? What's going to be the quality of your product? Then again, in those three circles, your audience is the crowdfunding audience. Yeah. Decide what risks. If this is only a video, then that's a different whole set of risks than if you're going to actually let them play with it online, for example. Yeah. And then you still need an expectation. How many people you want to be in the crowdfunding? How much money you want to raise? All that. Yeah. So it again becomes one more milestone as you go. Whatever you want to do, that's why you have the expectations, the risks to get there, and your audience that will see the benefit.
Thanks.
No, thank you for asking. It helps me polish the idea from whatever I missed. So just one last comment about minimal viable milestones and the way I work with teams. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic pill. There's work here to do. Usually when I work with teams, even before we start MVM, again, there's the mastery of the three focus areas, filling in those three areas with as much as possible detail. Even your status and alternatives, because you might have a solution in mind, but maybe it's not the most effective and efficient solution. And maybe diverting to a different solution can help you. Seeing the full picture again, it's crucial to have all that with high confidence before you start planning, before you start working and burning money. And then there's the whole aspect of mapping those MVMs, the negotiations between the stakeholders, how to prioritize, what are the risks, how to prioritize, who are the audiences, how to prioritize. All that is the process of making those MVMs. It cannot be just one person coming and say, okay, let's go. This is what I decided. You need the buy-in. That's where the win-win communication, it drives everyone understands why, and that's where everyone get hooked and work efficiently. So prioritizing, negotiating, and then the whole planning is iterative. I hope you saw with the image collection how it was somewhat an iterative process. And if we do it right, then even after you have the full map, you'll go and see that all the cogs are still working together and not missing out. So this is a process that even after the MVMs, okay, you have the plan, you started working, you need the execution to be nice because it doesn't matter how the plan is nice. I hope I'm not surprising anyone saying plans are great, but they only help to tell you when you went off track so you can go back to track, and they don't ensure that the performance will be squeaky clean. That's where productivity of the teams, their processes, their key performance criteria come in. You'll collect, after you even have the plan and start working, you'll collect feedback. You'll go to crowdfunding and understand something new. You'll talk to an investor and learn something new. You'll keep getting feedback. How do you bring that back to the plan update it. So there's like a continuous improvement process here happening all the time in the background. So one last word about myself before we go to the question and answers section. I said at the beginning, I'll mention how I work with teams. So usually I offer an MVM mentoring workshop. It focuses mainly on, sorry, I'll just go back, on this before and mapping, because the after is the whole process. It could take months, it could take years. But this condensed workshop, it could take 3 to 6 sessions. It focuses on the before MVM and the MVM planning. I try to assess where you are and how can I help you, if at all. Maybe I'm not the best fit. Maybe there's something missing, to my opinion, in your product. So we, again, have the negotiation to make sure we're the best fit to go together. And then I can analyze your options if you want to do something different. And that's exactly, those options, that's where I see people go twofolds, even sometimes 4 times slower to the market than just sticking to the original plan. And it ends with actually creating a full-blown plan with timelines, roadmap up to 5 years. So this is it. This is my presentation. I hope you learned something new, and we can go to questions and answers if you like, Atullah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. A lot of people saying thank you. Some say they want to go off, but yeah, they'll connect with you hopefully after this. We'll be putting the recording online as well on the meetup events as a comment, and we can also share with people. Maybe Robert, if you can, if you're happy to share your slides, we can send them to the people who RSVP'd as well. Is that something you could do?
Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, you put your email address right. There are some comments on the chat, not so much questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions as well. So yeah, some people have said about Steve Jobs' next computer, an example of with little regard for their intended target, universities, and very over-engineered and expensive. That's what David has said. I put in about Apple Newton. I don't know whether people are old enough here to remember Newton. It was way ahead of its time.
Yes.
So, yeah. And then someone, Brian has said about, was it Brian? No, Andrew has said about Apple iPod, which you know, blasted the competition, including Microsoft Zoom, yeah. If anyone has questions,
yeah,
feel free to ask. You can unmute yourself and ask, just like at a real event. That's what we like to do here.
Hi, Rob. Who should own the journey? So if we're in a business and running through the kind of life cycle of the MVM, who within the business should it kind of operate or kind of come from? Should it be the founder or kind of technical lead, a bit of both, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. I think
question is from Brendan. Is that so? We can't see
yes.
you, but we heard you. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Brendan.
I believe it has to be that person who is on the junction between everyone, between the external and the internal. So without going into titles, this if the founder is the person who talks to investors, who talks and then translates that back to the engineers, then that's the person. If it's a project manager or a scrum master or a product owner, it has to be someone who's willing to be on that edge between the two worlds, the internal in the company and the external to the stakeholders. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's on the mentoring level. The work itself will happen with many people, not just with one person, as I mentioned, because it is about negotiation. But just whispering into that ear of that one person, it should be what I mentioned.
Any other questions? Wait, if you don't mind, Robert, I'll stop the recording so that we could, people would feel more comfortable asking questions. So thanks everyone don't go anywhere, people in the room. I'm saying thanks to the people who have been watching this on the recording. This goes on Silicon Beach TV YouTube channel. And you know how to contact Robert through the slide, last slide, and through his website. So stay
I'll also
on
put
the
my
line,
link there.
everyone else. Yeah. Thanks, Robert. And I'll stop the recording there.
I'll put my LinkedIn as